Knowing who you serve, how you serve them, and breaking that down into products, programs, offers that define a profitable business model is absolutely everything when it comes to building your coaching, consulting, digital creator, and agency business. So, in this video, what I want to do is I want to just go over some high level stuff with you and kind of tie that all together and how I look at this. So, first things first, what we do with clients is we discover the niche. So if you think about the niche, it's kind of like if you had a target, right? And your what a lot of people do when they start in business is they try and start broad, right? So they think that if I can find a way to help everyone, then that's going to mean more money for me. And if I generalize, then I have a better chance of helping everyone in some small way. Therefore, everyone can pay me in some small amount, and through volume, I can create a profitable business, right? And in a way, I kind of often refer to this as like coming into business with the employee mindset, because when it comes to a job and the employee mindset, we often think about like if I want to earn more money, I need to trade more time, right? And so people get into business and they think if I want to earn more money, I need to work with more people. Therefore, as I said, generalizing, helping everyone in some small way for some small fee. The small fee part also comes into like a worthiness and um, you know uh, a confidence to charge more. And so this is how a lot of people start, right? And so if you give the example of like a coach, a lot of coaches start out trading literally time for money, and they sort of do like a general life coaching type thing, very broad. I can help anyone. Um, and while logically this seems to make sense, it actually is very counterintuitive to building a successful business that not only gives you the money, impact, and freedom you're looking for, but to actually, with the impact piece, to actually make a real difference to your clients' results. So that would be the example of trying to, target this outer ring, okay, of the target. Now, if you hit it, you'll get a few points, right? Just like any target, right? But you're also aiming towards the outer edge, so there's a good chance you can miss. And so we don't want to do that, all right? We don't want to be aiming for this bit here. What we want to do instead is we want to get more specific, okay? And so you'll hear a lot of people talk about choosing a niche. And so when they discover this concept, they go, okay, well, instead of just being a general life coach, if we use the coach example again, where I can help everyone elevate all areas of their life, I want to work in health and fitness, right? I want to specifically help people with their health and their fitness. And so that's sort of where we get into this next stage of more specificity. Um, and that's a good first step, but it's still not really where we ultimately want to be. So what I teach my clients to do is that, if we use the example of surgeons, right? So the general surgeon in the US makes, I think it's something like $200,000 a year, which is still a fair amount of money, right? But you compare that to a brain surgeon who I believe they earn something upwards of like 500 to 750,000. It's like more than three times what the general surgeon makes. Now, why is that? Well, when it comes to the brain, it's, one of, if not the most important parts of the body. It's certainly one that when you're operating on it comes with a lot of risk. Okay, and it obviously controls a good portion of the body, right? Really everything. So, the risk is higher, but the knowledge requirement is also higher, and the accuracy and the need for that brain surgeon to be absolutely specialized, to know everything about the brain specifically, and to have the steady hands to be able to work on someone. And obviously, if someone has a brain issue, like the problem is pretty severe because it controls a lot of the body. So the problem versus the reward, i.e., the healing, the fixing of the brain that that surgeon can provide, is quote unquote more valuable than, say, a general surgeon who fixes a broken arm, which is still important, obviously, but um, you know theoretically someone could, as long as it's not like a compound fracture, theoretically someone could forego surgery and still recover and like live at least, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for here is we want to be really, really specialized, okay? And you want to work with less people, but have a very specific understanding of that landscape. Like the brain surgeon has, a lot of knowledge when it comes to the brain. And you want to provide specific answers to problems, and pathways to promises and solutions, goals, dreams that people are looking for, and charge more for it, okay? And we'll get on to also a little bit more about the other reasons as to why this is really important for your business. But, that's the first place I want to start, right? So, and we want to actually be aiming for the bullseye of the target. This is where we want to be spending our time. And so, what you want to do is you want to get even more specific, right? And so, you want to go from just being in a niche to actually having a specific ideal client, okay? And so if we look at a niche, right? Well, actually, let me take a step back. If we look at the example I gave before of life coaching, again, it's very broad, okay? If we come in here and we talk about health and fitness, it's more specific. And if we talk about, in this example, helping people who want to lose weight, that's even more specific within health and fitness. But within a niche, there's a vertical niching that we can do, right? So anywhere along this specific area, there's actually people within that still differ, right? So there's still a vertical range in which we can be working within this. So there's still a certain amount of broadness when you say you want to work with people that want to lose weight. It is much more specific than being out here on the edges. But obviously within that, you've got male, female, you've got people that are 2 years old, right? You've got people that are 70 years old. You've got uh, people that are vegetarian, people that are specifically meat eaters, people that have issues with addictions, people that don't. Like there's so many variables within this losing weight range vertically. And there's also people further along the journey, right? So that's the other variable as well, is some people might have absolutely no idea about losing weight, about any sort of health and fitness. They're at the beginning of the journey. And then you could have someone who actually understands health and fitness a lot, has experience with losing weight, but is a bodybuilder and they've lost, they're down to like 10% body fat, but they want to understand how to get down to 3 or 4% body fat, right? So there's a very broad range vertically within this. So this is our niche. This is how I look at it anyway, okay? And I think this is where a lot of other coaches go wrong is they just talk about niche or ideal client. They don't really explain or help people understand what we're doing here and the way in which you can think you're being specific, but you're actually not, okay? And so what we want to do instead is we want to look at the vertical niche and find the ideal client. And that's really what an ideal client is. It's a very specific person within a niche, okay? So a very specific person within this vertical niche. We look down to, age, demographics, male, female, or both. What are their specific things they're looking for, like all of these things to come up with a very specific ideal client. And the thing about the ideal client you want to be aware of is that it's in the name, okay? So what a lot of coaches do is when they get to this step of getting a bit more specific or any business, but I'm just using the example of coaches still, um, they they go, oh, I'm going to work with my ideal client, and then they choose to work with like the worst person they could choose within this vertical niche. It could be like, I don't know. I don't want to sort of throw it out there and offend anyone, but like, people that maybe don't have the ability to afford them, people who maybe are less motivated, beginning of the journey, generally people at the beginning of the journey are there for a reason. They haven't figured out how to actually have the discipline in losing weight yet. Maybe have bad habits and all these sorts of things. And so coaches tend to sort of go for them. And again, this comes back to that worthiness thing. So they're trying to sort of bring the same mindset as what they're bringing up here about being general, because it's fueled by a certain level of like lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, lack of worthiness, lack of trust in yourself, whatever it is. It can be a number of things, but basically what you're saying is, I want to work with a person who's the easiest to work with, the easiest to sell for my abilities and my track record and all that sort of thing. But often, again, a lot of things in business are sort of like contradictory. So we think that these people are easier, but generally they end up being harder to actually work with because, like I said a moment ago, they maybe have more blocks, more reasons why they're at the beginning of the journey, trouble paying, all these sorts of things as well. So what you actually want to do is take the name literally and look for your most ideal clients. So these are people that have the money. So, it's the difference of maybe choosing like a young male who's still into partying, very overweight, has issues with addictions, hasn't really like learnt a lot about health and fitness, never worked out, that sort of thing, versus working with, high performance executives who already like have money and a good job, but also understand like health and fitness and high performance, and how that helps them achieve those financial results. And they already invest time and money into supplementation, and they already have a morning routine and so on and so forth. And they're looking for a way to actually just improve on that, right? So they've got the money, they've got the experience, they've built the discipline, they understand a lot of concepts, and they're looking for someone who can just find one problem that they have and provide a solution to that, and they'd be willing to invest in it, right? That's the sort of mentality I want you to have when you're looking at this. So that's the process to take clients through, right? Is going from very general and what it is, who we work with and what it is we do to help them, to being more specific, like finding a niche, an area within the market that you can be more specific, solving a more specific problem for a more specific person. But then within that niche, understanding who's my actual ideal client and getting really specific on that and choosing somewhere along the journey and the type of person within that niche that's going to be the most ideal client for you, right? So that's step one, okay? Once we have step one, then what we want to do is we want to figure out how we're going to solve their problems. So there's a process we go through with this whole ideal client niche thing. I'm not going to go through the full thing for time today, but basically we look at, as I said, all the demographics, but we also go into what are their problems, what are their solutions they're looking for, pain points, all of that sort of stuff, right? Because you need to understand what it is you're actually doing to help people. And this would be the same for an agency, right? If you're working with businesses, like specific businesses, like it's not just, oh, they want ads and leads, right? Like maybe they know how to generate leads, but maybe they don't have the systems to actually nurture the leads on the back end, or like there can be so many specific issues within that. And so that it's very easy to fall into a trap again, doesn't matter what business it is, right? Of thinking that we're being specific, but we're actually not. So you want to go in and dig out those pain points. But basically, if I assume you've done that, right? Um, then the next step would be what I call the bridge builder, which is like building the bridge from where they are right now, the problems they have, which we understand intimately, to the solutions that they want. Where do they want to go? What's the goal? What's the promise that you're offering, right? And so it's a very simple process, like everything we do. We list the problems on the left, okay, all of those specific pain points that they have. And then we look at the promise or solution on the right and we list those, which is usually just an opposite of the problems, the pain points. Okay, obviously, if someone, is overweight, they want to lose weight. Trouble with having discipline with eating, they want to learn how to find eating the right way more easy. Don't have an exercise routine and don't know what sort of exercise they should be doing to lose weight, right? Having that routine and having that knowledge and support. Don't have the support and accountability, fine, they drop off all the time. Wants the support and accountability, right? That's generally, how it goes, right? Obviously, sometimes there can be certain things in there that aren't an exact opposite, but you get the picture, okay? Now, the bridge to help them get from here to there is the how, okay? Now, the how is how you help them. This is the area that a lot of people focus on when they talk about marketing, when they talk about sales, right? They talk about the modalities, right? So it's not like, oh, I know that you are a 35-year-old executive male who, already has like a routine and an ability to, to look after yourself, but you're still finding that you feel that you're leaving some in the tank. Like you still feel like you wake up and you feel good about where you're at, but you know that you could be doing more. Your career is doing really well, but you're finding it hard to keep up with the pace and the stress, and you're finding it hard to balance the routines that you know you can normally do with your ever growing career and you want your career to grow and you want to have the fuel and energy to do that, but you also want to be able to obviously focus on that health and fitness and weight loss regime to keep your body in peak physical condition to not only maintain what you've got, but to actually continue to grow and step into, more responsibility work-wise and life-wise and so on and so forth, right? Um, and so I'm talking about the problems there, the situation they're in. I'm not talking about, oh, come and join me because I'll help you with your eating and I'll help you with your morning routine and I'll help you. Like, that's not speaking to the problem or the solution they're looking for. It's not a clear vision that they can put themselves into. It doesn't feel like I'm speaking to them and like almost understanding them better than they understand themselves. I'm just offering some vague solution. And this is what a lot of people do. They spend so much time talking about the how, not the why. Okay. Humans are motivated by why. So the why is, what pains do I have? What, promise am I looking for? What solution am I looking for? Okay. So we do need to know the how, obviously, and that's why it's part of the step. This is the bridge to get them there. But again, I just wanted to take that moment to reference when it comes to how you communicate. We want to know this and we want to provide this, but it's not what we speak about. It's a very common mistake that business owners make. Doesn't matter whether it's, agencies, like a lot of people are saying, oh, like, I'll help you get more leads, right? That's still super vague. And, again, people don't like everyone's heard that so many times. It doesn't really speak to me, right? What does speak to me is if I'm finding I'm getting leads, but they're not high quality. So it's like, are you waking up having problems getting high quality leads? Do you find that you're generating leads, but those leads aren't converting? Those people aren't necessarily your ideal client. And you feel like you have this ability to run ads and you know how to sort of do it all on a high level thing, but you're finding that your targeting is not getting the people that you need to, and you're just feeling frustrated because it's kind of this hamster wheel of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I think you understand what I'm talking about there. So back to this. So what we do is once we understand those pains and promises, which is what we tend to talk about and communicate, we still need to know the how, because that's how we formulate what we're going to offer this specific ideal client, whoever's, in this pinpointed target sort of niche, both horizontally and vertically, right? And this can be a confidence building exercise too. I find this every time I take a client through this, uh, they always leave feeling more confident, because it's funny how we sort of forget all the things we know, all the experience that we've had, the little problems that we've overcome. And we don't often, we don't reflect on that. And so every time I find that when people sit down and intentionally write out, like, what are the things that have helped me that I've overcome and learned that could be really good to help this person? What are the things that I've just had experience in? What have I spent time learning? All of these things. What are the things that I can help them get from where they are to where they want to be? And you end up coming up with a list bigger than, you would have if you've never actually sat down and done this, right? So, like I said, we still want to know the how, and that could be, the morning routine, right? Diet, accountability, and so on. So you list all of that out, and this essentially becomes the building blocks of the products or offers that you're offering, right? So we've gone through niche and then getting even more specific to ideal client. We've gone through the bridge builder, right? And there's a further process that I take clients through, but again, for time, I'm not going to go through that today, but how to sort of then break this down into actual modules and an easy way to communicate, because that's another issue that people face is like, even when I do need to speak about the how, which typically tends to be at the point of sale, the point of explaining whatever offer it is you're giving to a potential prospect, you need to have a model and a way to communicate that effectively. But, definitely follow for more. And, or if you're watching this in the course, obviously go through to that step and we'll show you how to do that. Um, but that's the basis of it, right? Is like, what are we actually offering people? How are we actually helping them get from here to there? And this also helps you exclude the things that people often bloat their programs with that they think are valuable because they like it or whatever. But it's like, it's not really necessary to get someone from here to there. And what you end up doing is you end up overwhelming and forcing clients to, like, if you're a coach, if it's an info product, or even if it's like an agency or a digital creator, right? Having all these like random offers, random products, random pieces within your program, whatever it is, that just sort of confuses the market. It makes it hard for people to and to really understand what it is you do and for you to really communicate that to the market. And if it's like a piece of a program, it makes it really hard for clients to focus on what's actually important to get them there. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Is like getting people from where they are to where they want to be, getting the results, getting the testimonial that feeds back into marketing, sales, everything else, right? So, being really clear about that when you do this process, like what is actually important here. Um, Okay, so then once we do that, then the next step is we want to build the business model. Okay, so I spoke about this in the beginning. All this leads us to a profitable business model that makes sense, that's going to get you to your goals, right? And so when it comes to the business model, we have a few things in this. Now, the first one is free content. Now, when we're talking about the business model, a lot of people ask me, well, why do we talk about free content? Isn't that marketing? Yes, it is. But I find that it helps to visualize the whole thing from that point because, again, this goes back to what we were saying before. You need to understand your ideal client and you need to make sure that all of your content is actually speaking to that person, as I mentioned earlier, right? Like you need to actually make people feel like when they're watching their content, when they're watching your content, that you almost understand their problems and their goals and desires better than they do and the solutions that they're looking for. Okay. So everything flows from knowing that ideal client, knowing how we can help them, building our products and offers, and then from that, working backwards, offering those exact same solutions aligned with the pain and goals that they have in the way that we communicate it to build our free content. Okay. The other reason I like to put it there is because in reality, in this day and age, free content can actually become a revenue for your business, right? Obviously, as you know, most platforms now, when you build a big enough following and you get enough, engagement and views and things like that, you actually can get a share of the ad revenue from those platforms. And so this can become an income stream for yourself, for your business, alongside everything else. Okay. So if you're building content that actually speaks to people, to their pain problems and where they want to go, and it adds value, provides solutions and all that sort of stuff, not only is that going to help you gain the following, gain the attention to actually sell your products, but obviously that's also going to work in terms of building that following to monetize the following. So I think it helps um, to look at it as a piece of one of your offers, one of your products, and that's why I teach it that way. And I don't really see anyone else talking about it like that, but I think that's really important to understand, right? Then from free content, we have irresistible offers, which are just lots of little like micro products offers, can be free, can be up to $100, could be more, but typically you find it's somewhere between free and $100. These are usually, again, if we're working backwards from whatever it is you're offering in your actual offers, your programs, your products, your solutions that you sell people, the main things you work on, which obviously comes from the how, the bridge builder exercise, right? Then your irresistible offers typically will be like snippets of that information or that service or whatever it is. So, for example, if you have that full program we're talking about with a health coach to help people lose weight for that specific ideal client, then maybe you could sell like an eating plan for $27 or something, right? And so it's like a snippet of the full offer, but it's something irresistible. The point of it is it's irresistible to get someone to hand over some sort of information and maybe a little bit of money in return for that offer. Okay, so you get their attention with the free content, then you offer something irresistible that's free or like slightly monetized. You get some information back, which allows you to turn them from a watcher into a lead, right? You gather more information to be able to develop that relationship further, obviously with the goal of leading to ultimately a sale, right? With one of your main offers. So you can have lots of different irresistible offers, and I recommend you do. And I recommend that, as I said, you take them from snippets of what you're offering because it should all be aligned, which is again why I like to look at it like this. And at the end of the day, you can actually make money on these. Like sometimes if you charge $27, it might just cover your ad spend if you're running paid ads. So it can help just minimize the expense. But in some cases, you can actually make money like on offering something for $27, especially if you've got like an organic list or you manage to get really cheap cost per client acquisition costs. If you're running those paid ads, like maybe you can get people for $10, you sell it for 27, you're making $17 profit per person, whatever it is, right? You can actually make some good money off this as well. But at the very least, it's actually getting those leads, those assets for your business, and ideally like minimizing the spend, like covering some of the spend, right? So you can spend more, scale up, you know, get more leads. But from irresistible offers, then we go into your core offer, your premium, and then in most cases, I find it's a good idea to have an extra premium offer as well, but not totally required. I think typically if you have two good offers and lots of different high converting irresistible offers, you can build a very successful business off that. I've done it before, but there's certainly a case for having an extra premium as well. Now, I'm not going to go into too much depth about the rest of this. If you want to see more, obviously check out the other videos in the course if you're one of the members of the course, or if you're watching this on one of the socials, head to my YouTube. My username is jfarinaofficial. You'll find the link below or somewhere here, right? I did a full breakdown on the business model, okay? So you can go and check that video out. But quick things I'll say is when it comes to the core, a lot of people, this has been named in a lot of people's sort of like, you would have probably seen this model before, and you would have seen this called the core. It's been called that in a lot of these models before, but I actually have a very different look at it. So typically people call it the core because it's like your main core program that you focus on. For me, it's actually not, and that's a very distinct difference. And I often say I need to come up with a different name for it, but as it stands, I still call it the core because I call it the core, not because it's your main focus, but because it's taking whatever it is you offer in these other programs, which are where you put your most focus and are focused at that ideal client, which I'll speak about in a second. You take the core pieces of that someone needs to know if they're at the start of the journey to be able to get like some, initial result. So it's like taking out core pieces of your service and making a cheaper entry level service for someone. Which leads me into what I wanted to say. So where I focus is in the premium. This should be your flagship. Okay, this should be your flagship offer where you spend most of your time, and this is your high ticket offer. And this is the thing that's targeted at that ideal client. Okay, so when we did that process before, whoever that person is, remember they're the ideal person. They have the money to invest in something that's designed specifically for them that adds lots of value, gets them really great results, and is the complete package that they're looking for without all the bloated excess, and makes it clear and easy for them to get results in whatever way that is, whether that's a done for you marketing program, if you're an agency, whatever it is, right? This is where you focus your time, and this is your high ticket offer. So typically for premium, we talk about charging 5K to 25K, but that it can be more, right? It can be more or it can be less, but I wouldn't go much less than 5K because this is your high ticket offer. And again, without going into this entire lesson in itself, this is one of the other big mistakes that people make. I spoke in the beginning, like in the example of a coach offering time for money, offering it at like, normal hourly rates and things like that, trying to get, wealthy and trying to scale a business just doesn't work. Instead, you go from one-on-one to one-to-many, build scalable products, things with leverage, whether you leverage yourself with a team or ideally you create like leverage in pre-recorded content, automations, group-based, services, that sort of thing. But also you bring lots of pieces together. So instead of it's just like your support, which would be like the equivalent of, those one-on-one coaching sessions, they've still got that, but ideally in like a group-based coaching session or group-based call, even if you're an agency, right? Like you could run like group-based service check-ins and things like that. You can still have elements of one-on-one too, but you just minimize it, right? So that you can provide scale. I still provide one-on-one elements within my premium, but less, right? And group-based leverage wherever you can. But then you also put those other pieces around it. So they're not just kind of getting the coaching session with you or the equivalent of whatever that is for your service. But in the example of that coach, it's not just getting those like one-on-one coaching service sessions equivalent, but the course, a pre-recorded course around that, right? Which is like hours of content that they can go through in their own time. Again, it's leverage for you, but it's tons of value for them. And it means you can focus on implementation, action, and actually like dealing with problems on those coaching sessions instead of spending an hour teaching. Then group-based community, there's a lot of value in community as well, right? People be able to network, people to get support, that sort of thing as well. You can offer like templates, all these things you can throw in whatever way it needs to be for your service, your offer, for your niche, your ideal client. You package it up into like what I said, a premium offer that really like solves people's problems, and you sell it for more. Okay. So this is for the ideal client. Now, remember I spoke about the vertical niching. There's like a range of people that are, further along in the journey, and we're going for that person that's the most ideal for you. But there's a number of ways you can do this breakdown between the core premium and extra premium. You can do it in the sense of like you can offer um, as I said, like a cut down version of whatever this is for that same ideal client. Offer it for cheaper. So normally, we look at the core offers being anywhere from $500 to, like 3K. So that could be like a course, it could be like a more entry level program. Obviously, again, you can charge more. It just depends on where we're talking about, right? But that could be just for the exact same person, or, and then this is like your main flagship for that same ideal client. And then extra premium is for that same ideal client, but it's like even more immersive, even more help. Like maybe that's where you do offer like just some one-on-one consulting. Or the other way you can do it, which you'll see a lot of people do, and this is how I do it because I like to help people along the journey. So um, I still have that ideal client in mind, right? But sometimes one of the best ways to get more of your ideal client is not necessarily to find them with ads, right? Depending on your industry, the biggest opportunity might not necessarily be in finding more of them, especially if you've got like market saturation. One of the better ways can be like a bigger opportunity, though it can present its own problems, is creating more of that ideal client. So in my case, working with coaches, consultants, digital creators, agencies, to find more six-figure plus, uh, businesses is not the biggest opportunity. For me, the biggest opportunity is create more people actually earning six figures who can then work with me in a more advanced way in the premium. So this is where instead of offering it as like different levels of support for the same ideal client, in this case, the core would actually be not my ideal client. It's not, a six-figure coach, consultant, digital creator agency, um, meeting all of those sort of metrics when it comes to my ideal client. It's someone who's like uh, in that vertical niche, they're earlier in the journey, because I value actually being able to help people to start. Like I would not be where I am today if I didn't have all the support that I did when I began. And because of my background and things like that, I really value helping people who really need it. And also, I understand that for me, it's one of the biggest opportunities is creating more six-figure business owners to then work with me in my premium programs to go from 6 to 7 and so on is a big opportunity. And I'm willing to face the challenges that come with helping people in that earlier stage of the journey, right? So that's the different ways you can look at it. It's up to you, or you could have a mixture of both. It could be that maybe you do the same thing for your core and premium, but then your extra premium is still for the same ideal client, but it's like the one-on-one option, like I said. It can be a mixture of both, but you just want to have some sense of like flow to this. For me, it's, as I said, someone at the beginning of the journey, ideal client, and then extra premium is for someone who's actually already at the seven-figure mark who wants to go multiple seven figures. And, I also have like some additional retreats and things for my core people and stuff. But yeah, that's beside the point. So that's what I wanted to talk about there is, we've gone through niche, we've gone through actual ideal client, then we've gone through how do we actually help them? How do we build the bridge from where they are to where they want to be? We remember that we speak about those pain points and the pleasure, the promise, the goal that they're looking for when it comes to all of our marketing. We don't sell the how, we sell the why, right? But we're still obviously clear on what the how is when it comes to explaining it to someone when they need that further information. Once we've spoken to the why, got their attention, they're willing to buy, they want to know the logistics. And obviously for us to create that product and service. And we've talked about the business model, some initial points on that. Really just relating to back to this ideal client idea. And I wanted to help you understand that, you can lay out this based on either all for the ideal client, or you can still target that range of your vertical niche, depending on where people are in the journey. But understanding where you put your most time is here in your premium high ticket offer designed for that ideal client. That's how you build a profitable model. You build something that really, changes people's lives. But you can still work with some people earlier in the journey. But again, it's still within a very specific niche, and it's not broad, right? We've talked about the benefit of specializing versus generalizing. And the last thing I'll say is that when you're talking about the why, just understand that people are more motivated by pain than they are by pleasure, typically. And so, if anything, of the two, the most important one is that you want to speak to those pain points, but it's really good to have, an emphasis on both, right? So that's it from me. Like I said, if you want to see more about the business model, then obviously check out that video. Um, but go ahead now and transform your business, transform your marketing, everything that you do by getting more specific on who it is you're actually serving, how you serve them, and then creating a business model that actually works in effect with that. And remembering that you want to create leverage and price points in such a way that you can actually deliver on that and live the life you want to live, which is having the money that you want, the impact that you want, and the freedom that you want as well, which is a big mistake that people make, is they don't create a business model that's ever actually going to give them the goals that they get into business for. So that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.